This is the B5 S4 that I've been building over the course of the past few months. It's come a long way, and we have a long way to go. Today, I've got 2 mods that are going to get us one step closer to our goal. Let's start by finishing up what we started last week, swapping over some vinyl to a new type. Specifically, we are replacing some interior trim and rewrapping it in a higher quality gloss carbon finish vinyl wrap. And it seems like you guys agree with me that we should switch the rest of the car to the glossy finish. That's not going to be the focus for today. Today, we're actually going to properly mount what we installed last time. I've got more of the glossy carbon on the way so that we can do the doors as soon as it arrives. When it comes to ordering vinyl wrap, I always like to do a few test pieces like this and then order the correct amount afterwards, so you don't waste it if you end up not liking the pattern. Now back to the topic at hand. Last episode, we replaced this front dash trim as well as wrapped it in the glossy finish. I tried to install it with just 3M tape, like what was on the car before from the previous owner, but that wasn't strong enough. The authentic clips to get this to actually stay in place were really expensive online, so I decided to order these aftermarket heat shield clips. I think these are technically called the locking washer, and you basically just shove them onto the end of the trim, and they'll prevent the little piece of trim from backing itself out. I'm only going to need to use 2 of them because really they're incredibly strong. Other than being a little bit difficult to get to, they're really easy to install. You simply push them onto the back of the trim. You will, however, have to take off that side panel on the passenger side and the underdash on the driver's side. But after that, it is smooth sailing. It's not necessarily in this clip, but I also did this same process with the new locking washer for the other trim on the dash. This trim fits better than ever, and I could not be happier with the outcome. Now that it's fitting properly, I'm actually really excited to get the doors working as well once the vinyl wrap comes in. The glossy carbon wrap looks a lot better than the unfinished carbon, and I think we can both agree that either one of those looks a lot better than the factory wood trim that comes in the car, at least from a dating standpoint. Both of them make the car feel a lot more put together and modern. The S4 has a ridiculous amount of modding support, and you can spend a lot of money if you're not too careful. Generally, there's cheap and expensive options for pretty much any mod out there. If budget was no option, the S4 has a tremendous amount of gorgeous parts, and somehow this week I found one for really cheap. I can think of a few things that I am a complete sucker for when it comes to cars. One of which is beautiful carbon fiber work. It's a super cool medium, and the parts that come out are honestly just gorgeous to look at. Plus, it's light and really good for your car. The second of which is induction noise. I know it's not necessarily going to benefit performance that much. I think it sounds awesome, and it's definitely worthwhile. An opportunity presented itself. Now, this is generally more than I would ever spend on this kind of a part, but I got a stupid deal. If you know much about S4s, or if you've looked for parts and mods for these cars specifically, you can probably tell where this is going. If you read the title or guessed intake, you win. To show why I am so excited about something as simple as an intake, let's take a look at the stock airbox that's in the car. The stock airbox is gargantuan in size and isn't really the prettiest thing, though it does support quite a bit of horsepower for a stock box. Unlike most cars out there really aren't that many options as far as intakes for the S4 because it's so hard to engineer one without a massive amount of heat soak.
That's a water bottle for scale.
If you've ordered an intake before and you're like me, you might think that is an insanely large box for an intake. Well, you're right, the intake doesn't need the big box. It's actually the heat shield that needs the big box, and that's because it's made out of genuine carbon fiber. It's specially molded to this car, it's excessive, and I can't believe I have it. This is probably the nicest car part I own, and it's a 034 Motorsports 2.7T carbon fiber intake kit. Most people who want a cheap intake on the S4 just cut up the stock airbox and fit a cone filter. While that increases your induction noise a lot, it may equally increase your heat soak, because it's not sealed. That's why this carbon heat shield is so important. It's specifically molded to seal perfectly with the hood of your car when it's closed, creating an airtight chamber. This chamber houses the cone filter. The air that comes into this chamber is directed through the grille from the outside of the car, so it's almost guaranteed to be cold air. That's one of the reasons that 034 Motorsports lists this as a cold air intake, even though it's technically by design a short ram intake. I'm not sure how true this is, but I do think it's funny that they rate this intake to support up to 800 horsepower. Not to mention, the carbon in this engine bay is going to make it look so much better. I'm honestly still kind of shocked that I found this for such a good price. It's normally well above what I would want to spend on an intake. Another thing to note is that intakes are incredibly easy to install, and the stock airbox on the S4 literally comes out in a matter of 5 minutes maybe. The hardest part about it is reaching the clips that hold the top of the airbox on. Then you can simply unbolt the bottom part of the box and it comes out through the top. Now we have an open space to work with. The last thing I want to do is risk cracking or breaking the heat shield that came with this kit, and I know it's designed to fit perfectly, so we need to move some things out of the way to get it to actually fit in without having to bend it. I decided to unbolt the passenger headlight so that I could slide it forward a bit, giving myself more room to drop the heat shield into place. I also opted to temporarily remove the lobster claw since I know the heat shield wraps around to the front grille of the car to take in cold air. My goal was to just have as much room as possible on this side of the bay. With both of these out of the way, it was really just a matter of nerve-wrackingly sliding it into place and getting it lined up properly. I can't really emphasize just how stressful it was to slide this into place since I didn't want to spend money for a new one. At the time, breaking this was probably the only fate I could think of that was worse than death. Thankfully, with all the pieces I removed, it's able to get into place just perfectly and it fits like a glove. Now, before I actually mounted the heat shield to the car, I went ahead and reinstalled the lobster claw, and this is specifically because I will not have as much room after it's bolted down. This kit is designed to reuse the stock hardware that installs to the stock airbox, but since it's a nice intake, I wanted to replace this with some nice new silver hardware. At the same time, I also replaced the hardware that holds the other side of the airbox to the frame of the car, but that bolt you can't really see. Before we install the cone filter, I want to take a second to show you how the heat shield directs the air from outside the car towards the filter. Cold air is going to come through the grille and through this specific hole that was designed for the stock airbox. Through this, you can see the new carbon chamber, which is sealed to the top of the hood and the bottom of this area, and basically just surrounds the cone filter with cold air. The rest of the install isn't nearly as nerve-wracking, as you're really just putting on a bunch of different silicone tubes so that it fits properly, and the first of which is the adapter to the mass airflow sensor. Once this is on, you can use the plastic extender to actually connect it into this airbox we made. The kit comes with another silicone hose to go around this plastic extender. The purpose of this is just to seal off both sides of the intake. The mass airflow side is sealed, and so is the actual intake chamber. Now it means we can put on the air filter. I know intakes aren't necessarily something that really increases horsepower, but they're really satisfying to install, and honestly, I think they sound great. Maybe I'm not alone in thinking that they're probably one of my favorite installs to do on a car. And this is definitely my favorite intake that I've ever installed. Before we go joyride the car trying to find placebo horsepower, let's take a second to appreciate this actual part. I think this new piece is absolutely gorgeous when it's finally fitted to the car. Let me know what you guys think. I think this is an absolutely gorgeous upgrade to our engine bay, but now the only problem is I really need to replace the rest of it so it looks as good as the intake. I definitely think the Y-pipe is going to be the next thing to change. The same company that makes the intake also makes a carbon fiber Y-pipe, coincidentally, that supports RS4 levels of airflow. It's too much. I know it's too much, but I can't help but wonder just how good it would look with the intake. So when we upgrade the turbos on this car, maybe we'll get it. If you guys can convince me, it's absolutely mission critical for our build. We're still in the middle of pollen season, so this car is absolutely filthy, meaning the first place I take this car before we actually go test drive it is the car wash. Now that she's all clean, let's go have some fun on a back road. I really do love this intake. I got this locally for a good deal, so I'm okay with spending what I spent on it, and honestly, I think it elevates the engine bay tremendously. It adds a lot of intake noises, and you can really hear the diverter valves every time you shift, which I absolutely love. Like I said, I'm a sucker for intake noises. This car is really starting to feel like less of a broken vehicle that I bought for cheap, and more of a project that I've put hundreds of hours into and am starting to really love. It is a tremendous platform, and I have so many plans for it. I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch my video. Hopefully you found it entertaining, and if you enjoyed it or learned something, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. I'm gonna have project cars the rest of my life, and I'll be documenting them all here. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.